Fascinating that Szymanowski should have chosen the title Masks for these three pieces. So who's hiding behind the masks? What is masked there? Masks are about an assumed and adopted identity, something you take on to half conceal, half not conceal the real face behind. They're all about the big perennial subjects of music, and particularly of opera, and that's love and death. The three stories, Scheherazade, the story of Tristan, made famous by Wagner in Tristan and Isolde, and the story of Don Juan, made famous in Mozart's opera Don Giovanni, form the basis of these three pieces. There's some very interesting hidden texts going on in these stories. Szymanowski's own relationship to women, he very much enjoyed the company of women, and women very much loved him. But what they may or may not have realized was that ultimately Szymanowski was not available. The first, Scheherazade, yes, this is the story about the young woman who eventually successfully wins over the Sultan by her storytelling powers and combined with her very obvious charms. And the movement is laid out so that you almost sense that within the story of Scheherazade are little stories, little episodes that take place that are, we're almost in the position of the Sultan himself being wooed, being seduced by the stories of Scheherazade.
My first intuitive response to Masque is, my God, how does anybody play this? It is phenomenal piano writing. It's absolutely extraordinary. It bursts the bounds of that instrument. Often it literally bursts the bounds, going on to three staves, which I think keeps it clear. It's quite interesting that Szymanowski himself said, well, it's not really that difficult. It just looks difficult. But I'm not sure that every pianist would agree with that.
Not only are there some fabulous, delicate acrobatics required of the fingers in these pieces, it also requires incredibly subtle use of the sustaining pedal. The effect whereby you're able to create the texture where there are two or three things going on at the same time. That really is very high-end quality piano playing, which Szymanowski perhaps felt that he couldn't achieve for himself. It's striking that he dedicated them to three other pianists that he knew very well. Alexander Dubiansky, who died tragically young, Heinrich Neuhaus, his cousin, who went on to become one of the century's great teachers as well as one of the century's great pianists, and of course his friend from a long time ago, Artur Rubinstein, with whom he had such a close relationship. The second movement, Tantris, this is it's the name Tristan spelled backwards, which in itself is another kind of mask. This is, again, a sort of rather comic, but at the same time sad story. Tristan presents himself as the jester. He's the comic, but he comes to this terribly sad realization that while the dog recognizes him, the woman he loves doesn't.
The opening of Tantris has a lot in common with Ravel's piano writing. In particular, something like Alborada del Grazioso, which is very staccato and very sharp and kind of jagged around the edges. But a few pages further in, we're back in the world of Stravinsky's Petrushka and the really quite chunky, quite parodistic depiction of scenes and characters. There's something very detached about this music and quite ironic, quite cynical. And the whole issue of what is there behind this mask is very much to the fore. We never really learn what's behind the mask. We don't know whether Szymanowski is ever going to let us see it.
And finally, Don Juan Serenade. Are we getting a kind of a reversal of Mozart's portrayal here? In Mozart, Don Juan's frustration mounts throughout the opera as each one of his attempts to seduce a woman fails. Ultimately, it's thwarted. But in a way, isn't this piece slightly mocking Don Juan for his charm, for his seductive charm? Is this Szymanowski mocking himself? Because in all the moments of incredible sensuous beauty that there are in these three pieces, there's a new sound which is beginning to creep into Szymanowski's music, and that's sarcasm.
This is one of the heights of his level of inspiration, and also how complicated he could write. Just as a pianist, we're used to playing music on two staves usually, but this is mostly of such a complexity that it's almost always written on three staves. So just before you get used to reading it like that, of course he did it to simplify it for us pianists, but the amount of notes in these three pieces is quite severe. And his level of imagination here reaches new heights, really. He paints these kind of dream landscapes. I see distant castles, and the sounds are just incredible, the colors and all the characters. And in the Don Juan Serenade, which is one of the most difficult ones, I think actually Szymanowski is one of the ones that he played himself in concert, actually. And it has incredible levels of seriousness and playfulness and violence mixed with gentleness. Just the beginning. It's like, how assertive can you start the piano piece? Playful. There's magic in there. Kind of guitar music, huh? So it's Don Juan trying to sing with his guitar.
One of the extraordinary emotional edges in masks is this quality of irony and sarcasm, which were qualities you very, very rarely, if ever, found in 19th century music. Of course, the people who were beginning to take this a lot further were the Russian composers, notably Prokofiev, whose Vision Fugitive were written at a very similar time. These are incredibly sardonic little pieces. I don't know whether Szymanowski had heard them. He had met Prokofiev. He might have heard something from that. And then, of course, Shostakovich took this to new heights in the ensuing decades. So in a way, Szymanowski is almost a missing link in the creation of this quality in the music of the first half of the 20th century.